Thank you very much. This being the Brussels Forum, of course, I have the privilege and the pleasure to introduce a very distinguished panel to you. From left to right, we have Pierre Vimont, who is, Cathy Ashton has just been talking about, the Secretary General of the European External Action Service. Welcome, Pierre. We have, and this, I forgot to mention this almost, but this is a ray of light when we look at the developments in the Arab world. A representative of Tunisia with Monsieur Ghannouchi. We have one of the most outstanding thinkers on political Islam. Thank you for making it here. Wendy Sherman is the Undersecretary for Political Affairs. Thank you for coming here. And we have the Foreign Minister of Qatar, Khalid ibn Mohammed, Al-Attiyah. Thank you for coming here. I actually would like to start with Europe, Pierre, if you allow me. And the question, probably not only I, but many have been thinking about, is when we look at the record of the European Union, taking into consideration that the MENA region and the Near Middle East is our immediate neighborhood. If I was friendly, I would say our record lets quite a bit of room for improvement. And if I would be less cheerful, I would say it's pretty abysmal when it comes to humanitarian issues like taking in, for example, refugees from Syria. As I said, Lebanon, Turkey, and Jordan have taken in hundreds and thousands. We've taken in, what, a few 10,000s? So the question, of course, to you is, where is the strategic ambition of Europe when it comes to our direct neighborhood? Are we still aiming at something? Do we have something in mind when we come to this region? Is there something that we really want to shape here?
Good start.
Well, I was told I was not supposed to be all too cheerful.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think it's a question that many ask themselves, and even inside the European Union. It's about our neighborhood. As it is, just as much as it can be easy to find a goal for our Eastern partnership, because at the end of the day, countries that belong to the European continent and could look for accession or membership of the European Union. It's a bit different, of course, with our southern neighbors. We have to find a goal for this kind of partnership we have with them. And let's be honest, we've always been struggling a little bit with that in trying to find out exactly what was the final goal of the partnership we wanted to have with these countries. As it cannot be accession, it has to be something else, a very close partnership. But what should this partnership be made of? It's about having a common market, it's about trade, it's about mobility also, allowing students, researchers, workers to come in and to come out. It's about cooperation with research, cooperation in every possible field. It's about helping them to build up their own regional market. It's all about this. And it takes time, and it takes time.
But wait, if I take that, then I would say when we can't offer the price of membership, accession to the European Union, when it's not joining the club at the end, our imagination in foreign politics seems to be somewhat limited.
No, I think it's joining the club by other means and through other ways. What I think we're missing maybe at the moment is to understand exactly what was the importance not only of the political problem but also of the economic problems they were facing. And we came back to them with our usual answers, which was let's try to build a trade agreement. But trade agreements usually take 5 or 6 or 7 years to be negotiated. And what all these countries need is quick, urgent answers and support and assistance immediately. And this is where I think we have to do a better job. Coming just back 1 second to what you were saying about refugees, of course we haven't done enough and we should do more. But it's of course totally different whether you are a country of the neighborhood of Syria, namely Lebanon, Jordan, or Turkey, and whether you are Sweden, France, Germany, or Spain. You're much further away. It's not exactly the same distance. And therefore, I don't think you can make exactly the same kind of comparison. I think you have to take that into account. But of course, we should all do more. And of course, the best way that we can help Syrian refugees is to try to find a political solution to the problem. I mean, we will always come back to that.
Ambassador Sherman, a couple of weeks ago, I was listening to a lecture by Rached, the head of the Foreign Council. And he was very adamant that really pivot to Asia meant just that, pivot to Asia, and that the US is going to withdraw more or less from the Middle East. And he tried to assure his audience that, you know, you won't see much of the Middle East in the future. I kept wondering about two things. One is the Middle East has a tendency to drag everybody back in, whoever tries to get out. And the second thing is, why is he trying to prove to us that the Americans are really sort of leaving the Middle East when we haven't seen much of strategic ambitions of this government, this US government and the Middle East either? I cannot remember that I've heard or seen too much on Libya after the military intervention. We seem to be all pretty helpless when it comes to Syria. Yes, there is an initiative on the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, but forgive me about saying this, this doesn't seem to be the uttermost urgent issue right now in the Middle East. There are others. So also the question to you, where is the US administration's strategic ambition when it comes to this region?
Well, I think I would obviously challenge your premise that the United States has left the Middle East. I think the foreign minister would tell you that he and Secretary Kerry probably talk every week, if not more frequently than that, see each other all over the world, in many capitals, all focused on the political, economic, and security situation and challenges in the Middle East. And when I say the Middle East, I mean a very large swath from the Gulf and the Levant all the way to the Maghreb and the Sahel, quite frankly, because the security challenges really move from east to west across the way. I think our very good friend here, who has really been, as you said, an intellectual leader and a party leader in Tunisia, is really the beginning of an aspiration that is throughout the Middle East and throughout the world, quite frankly. I just came here this afternoon after spending 2 days in Ukraine, and the way the two pieces come together, because I know it's so much on everybody's mind, is that this is all about aspiration for a better life. This is about Ukrainians saying, we want European values, we want American values. We want the prosperity that we see on Al Jazeera, that is happening in other places. This is about the street vendor who wanted a better life, a decent wage, a better job. We have huge populations of young people throughout the Middle East who wonder where their future is going to be. They know that in many countries that might be oil rich, that is not sustainable into the next century as they grow up, as they raise their families. So they're looking for diversification of their economy and coming into modernity without losing their cultural sense of self. And I think America is very present, not only in the Middle East peace process, with which both the President and Secretary Kerry have put their heart and souls into, but Libya, the Secretary was just in Libya. We were all just at a Rome ministerial, trying to take account of where we were, what else we can do to support Libya moving forward. Tunisia's done extraordinary things, and I want to give credit to the Ennahda party, which just made very tough decisions to probably now have the most progressive constitution in the entire Middle East. And this is really a testament to a set of values that I think is also strategically how we have to think going into the next century. And that is, it is not about Islamism and secularism, or Russia and the West, or Shia and Sunni. It's about pluralism and the rule of law versus imposition of one's values on someone else, whether they want them or not. And that is the strategic value that we're all trying to chart a course for.
Understood. On the other hand, it does remind me a bit of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, because for 20 years, basically, or at least for the last 10 years, we basically know what it is supposed to look like at the end. The one problem we have is we don't know how to get there. Now, same here. We know it is about participation. We know it's about having a better life. We know it's about getting young people into jobs, etc., etc. But that seems to be such a long stretch for them. What is it that we do on the ground to help solve these problems? Economically, or mainly economically?
I think economics is a critical part of it, and everybody in this room, from whatever country you're in, has probably provided assistance, provided trade, provided assistance where the IMF is concerned, where that's an appropriate instrument, trade agreements, all manner of ways to help people develop their own economy and their own aspirations. It is a tough world, but if we learned anything from 2008, it is not a decoupled world. We are all integrated with each other. We are all connected with each other. So whatever we do in one part of the world is going to have a ripple effect in another part of the world. So if we cannot, Europe and the United States, the transatlantic relationship, bring up our global economy, it will have an impact on the price of oil in the Middle East. It will have an impact on the ability to create jobs for the future. It will have an impact on our ability to create a trading system where everybody has to play by the same set of rules. So we all have to lift towards that end in every region of the world.
For Mr. Al-Attiyah, well, I've been probably a bit, overreaching when it came to the overall strategic ambition of both Europe and the United States. I was wondering if there is a bit of over-ambition on the side of Qatar. You've been very active over the last years, and for a while it seemed that the Qatari government was mainly busy with supporting the Muslim Brotherhood. There were complaints that Qatar was sending weapons to opposition forces who were, to say the least, not always clearly supporting the transition into democracy. And that's nicely put. Again, also to you, what do you have in mind? How do you want to shape your immediate neighborhood? What is it supposed to look like?
Under the air, you say that I have to be short in my answer. The question you say needs a manual of answer.
That's not an easy way out. It still has to be short.
I agree with you in the strategic ambition of Qatar. Actually, Qatar has a strategic role to do. We are a part of the international community. We have obligation, as most of our colleagues here has an obligation toward each other. As Wendy said, we are all interconnected. Every one of us has a role to do. Qatar playing very positive roles in all the international.
I did expect that you would say that.
Well, this is what we believe we are doing, and we would like to hear otherwise if there is. And we have three things to think about in Qatar. First of all, we are one of the largest exporter of energy to the world, so we want to keep our area as stable as possible so we can reach out to other friends who need this energy. And it's not about just selling oil and gas and getting, we have to have a very stable flow of energy to the world. This is one. Two, we have a humanitarian obligation toward the world, and this is where we stand up and supported the Arab Spring from Tunisia, and thank you that you brought one of the wise men in Tunisia who managed to sail through this rough sea, and we can all see that Tunisia is coming to a safe shore now with their wise men ship in Tunisia, and wish that everyone follow this path. In Qatar, we believe that all the Arab Springs countries going through now is a yo-yo example, if I may call it. It will settle down. We have this experience in all the European countries in the past. Everyone went through revolution and went through struggle for their justice and free world. And in the end of the day, they settled down and they are flourishing now and prosperous. The same. In our region, you have 1/3 of our region are youth. So in Qatar, we have to take care of them. They need to have decent life. They need to have jobs. And all of you here are responsible to help on this, because in the end of the day, if you see, most of the Arab Spring countries are set on the Mediterranean. So next door to them, or the neighbor, are Europe. And you've been suffering for a long time from the illegal immigrant. So we have to put hands on hands all together to work to bring stability to their country. So they have the ambition, they have the intellectual ability to build their own countries. They only need us to give them this jumpstart thing. And this is what we have to do together. This is how we think in Qatar about reaching out. We never have a strategic ambition. We have a strategic role. And this is what we are playing in Qatar.
So let me just ask this. Why is it that the Gulf Cooperation Council sometimes is so mad at Qatar?
Well, you know, these things we always advise our colleagues in other Arab countries to solve their issues in dialogue. And this is what we are trying to tell our colleagues in the other GCC, that dialogue is the best way. Sometimes maybe we are too fast in trying to enlighten our people, maybe. And maybe we are a little bit, mobilized. We can, but in the end of the day, let me assure you one thing, and this is not a hypocrite or anything. This is a real situation in the GCC. In the GCC, no matter what you do, the social fabric of the GCC people does overwhelm and does dedicate the terms on the whole GCC countries, because I have cousin in Kuwait, my nephew in Bahrain, my uncle is in Saudi, and my grandfather in Oman or UAE. So you cannot, the fabric of the GCC, they are the one will, override any misunderstanding among the political figures.
Just one last question, and it can be answered probably with one word. Are good relations with Saudi Arabia a strategic asset for Qatar? Are they very important to you? And would you do almost everything to keep these relations?
Absolutely. Saudi Arabia is our strategic depth. Absolutely. And let me tell you something. I read a lot of articles these days. Sorry, I'll do it short. About the disagreement between Qatar and Saudi in Syria. This is not true. In Syria, we have the highest coordination with our colleagues, friend of Syria, and namely Saudi Arabia. So this is a fact.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ghannouchi. Now I can come to you. You've been praised very much, also by Wendy Sherman just now, for the constitution that was just written in Tunisia. And it was a long and very tedious and very complicated process. And I think we all acknowledge this, and this is why I'm saying Tunisia certainly has been a ray of hope in this. Unfortunately, it's the smallest of all the transitional countries, but still, it's an example. I wanted to ask you, a couple of years ago, I believe, you've been asked if you're not going to be elected, would you still stand for office? Would you still run in another election? And then you said yes, and we just have to try harder to convince people of our model. And now you've agreed to a constitution that is very liberal, that has included rights of women, minority rights, very important, and it's really a very big step forward. What would you tell skepticists who would say, in the end, the Islamists are only out there to wait for their moment to change all this? Was this a tactical move, or is this a strategic thing? How long do you think will the constitution last?
I think we haven't judged Islamists by intention to condemn them priorly. We have to judge them through their deeds, what they said and what they do. I think all Tunisians are very proud now that they succeed to have a very important, very progressive constitution signed by 22 parties to 200 of 216. All fractions, all parties are agree that the constitution represents themselves. This constitution represents very important combination or good marriage between Islam and democracy, between Islam and human rights, between Islam and the universal values. But this constitution is not simple accident. It's fruit of long discussion, long dialogue, national dialogue between us and others.
And a dialogue that you insisted had to be peaceful all the time.
You know that you pay as Islamists, we pay a high price for having this constitution. We see the government not through elections, but through discussion, because without that we couldn't have, Tunisian people cannot have this constitution. So we pay a high price. We found ourselves obliged to choose between continue in government because we have been elected, or resign with intention, without any force to give Tunisian this constitution.
Yeah.
I think we bet on the winner horse when we give this agreement. We have this constitution.
Does this mean also that you had to make some, how would I say, that you had to pay a price also on your core beliefs, that you had to give up some of the core beliefs of the political Islam that you helped to form in order to have a constitution that would include all of Tunisia's citizens, just because the reality is different from what you wanted it to be?
I think who can follow our culture as Tunisian Islamist, he can discover that since 1981, when we established our movement, we still insist on the compatibility between Islam and democracy, between Islam and the human values. And since that, until we draft this constitution, we didn't contradict ourselves. So this constitution, these beliefs, is not simple accident, but it's itinerary.
It's a development.
A long itinerary.
Thank you. We've put up a question here for you to vote on. If you can have this question on for a moment, because we really wanted to know what, in your view, might stand in the way of a peaceful, stable, and possibly democratic development in the Arab transitional countries. A, economic challenges. B, problems of governance, bad governance. 3, place of religion in society, including fundamentalism, or the fourth option, all of the above. You know it, you have 15 seconds. Vote now, please. And I'm aware there are a few factors missing. I like that you get such quick results.
Yes, well.
Oh, well, all of the above. But what is really interesting is, to me, that when it comes to the economic challenges, it's just 4.8%. That's a very small minority of you who think that it really is about jobs, and it really is about the future, and about earning enough money, etc. Problems of governance, bad governance, it's almost 20%. The largest group of above, exempt of all of the above group, is place of religion in society and fundamentalism. Wendy, Sherman, you've been so positively speaking about the constitution in Tunisia. Why would you think the problems of the place of religion and fundamentalism would be the most urgent problem when it comes to these countries? I mean, you were so adamant saying, really, there shouldn't be a problem with the compatibility of Islam and democracy. Why?
I think the real quantitative number on there is the 53.2%.
The all of the above?
The all of the above. And these things are interwoven. I do think we lose focus a little bit when we forget that the largest Muslim country in the world, Indonesia, is an imperfect but pretty thriving democracy. The second largest Islamic population in the world, Muslim population in the world, is India, which has a difficult democracy and a coalition democracy, but seems to have a democracy. So I think that one of the issues is really how that third sentence was written, which is the place of religion in society / fundamentalism, as if religion and fundamentalism are one and the same things, and they are not. We all have fundamentalists in our country, and fundamentalism does not mean extremists either, which we conflate from time to time. So I actually think one has to disaggregate number 3. I think it's a poorly worded question because I think the anxiety in the West is about extremism. Secondly, fundamentalism that turns into extremism or denies the rule of law or denies pluralism or denies rights, universal rights. But religion, far be it from an American to say that religion doesn't matter when I think most of you know Bruce Stokes and I have been around together for quite many years now. And Pew's numbers show that the United States believes that to be moral, you have to believe in God. We are an incredibly religious society. We believe that we can determine our future, but God has an awful lot to do with it. So I think it's a rather misplaced question,
if we rephrase it for a minute, if we say this is about separation of religion and state, because you can be an awfully religious society, but as long as there is separation of religion and state, you can make sure that God is not in charge of things, because politically, really, you cannot vote God out of power, and that seems to be the problem with with some of these societies. Well,
yes, but we also have to remember there are differences. In Indonesia has its version of madrasas, schools where religion is very tied into how children learn. Because there's a set of values that go with that. So I just think we often, because it's easier, get rather reductionist about all of these issues when the world is far more complex, and the focus really ought to be on, as I said, not Islamism versus secularism or even religiosity versus secularism. It's about whether we are putting systems in place that allow for pluralism and human rights and rule of law, because it is that governance system, to the second point there, that creates the platform for economic development.
Understood. Monsieur Ghannouchi, a quick question to you, because we've just been mentioning this, and I was wondering how far this would go. Would your engagement in the political process in Tunisia, Ennahda's interaction with the political process, informing the political process in Tunisia, go so far as to say, yes, what in the end we need in order to have checks and balances, in order to have better governance, is really a separation of religion and state?
The Tunisian constitution accepts, and it's very clear in this constitution, that there is a real separation. The state is neutral vis-à-vis all religion, all minorities. And the main problem now is how to practice in reality these values, because there is some extremism, some groups who couldn't accept or even understand that separation or that neutrality vis-à-vis all religion and all ideas, because we believe that the state has no to do vis-à-vis the ideologies, the ideas. State has to be neutral vis-à-vis all ideas, all ideologies, religions. Mm-hmm. So the problem is now how to implement this ideology, this constitution, and the main problem in Tunisia now who face our transition of democracy is the economy issue, because the regions where the revolution start still waiting that the revolution change positively their life. Mm-hmm. But so far they don't feel that the revolution has changed
that there has
positively.
Changed in their life positively.
So we appreciate what, for example, Qatar has done for assist Tunisia and European and Western countries. But I think if this model, if the Tunisian example, if this candle, we believe that it has to continue shine and affect positively the Arab region, we have to invest in democracy. Because the Western countries, for a long time, they invest in dictatorship regime. So it's time to invest in democracy, because the democracy is the only way to
guarantee peaceful development?
the peace in the world, and to guarantee the real economy and real justice.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure there are plenty of questions now that you have. Same rules, I'm sorry about this. Same rules. Quickly introduce yourself, be short, and I'll be taking your questions. There's one in the back, and then we go to you. Can you have a mic here?
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm Roland Freudenstein from the Wilfried Martens Center for European Studies here in Brussels. And I've got a question to Minister Al-Attiyah. And I think it's a very simple question. You talked about, you praised the Arab Spring, you talked about the strategic role that Qatar can play. And other panelists have talked about the value of democracy. Now, yet I read that the Emirate of Qatar has no independent legislature, has no political parties, and that elections that were planned for 2005 have been postponed indefinitely. How do you bring that together?
Thank you for the question. But first of all, Qatar has a constitution. Qatar was not planning for election in 2005. In fact, the election is by the end of 2013, and for some technical reason, it's postponed to maybe the end of 2014. The thing you have to understand is, like our colleague just says now, it is the style or the way of life of if you utilize your resources for the prosperity of your people, and you set the stage for them for the best education, the best health, I think it is the people who we should go and ask if they wanted their system to be changed or not. If the people ask to change the system, rest assured that we will do so.
Which means that you will have elections very soon, which will not be postponed for some technical matters again?
No, the election has not been postponed because we don't want. Otherwise, we wouldn't issue our constitution. The new constitution of Qatar said that there will be election for the parliament. And this is, we are, in the end of the day, we have a vision for 2030. We want to develop our country. If you, I will extend invitation for all of you to come to see Qatar. We are going onto our way to improve our country and to reach our vision. And this is why we welcome any criticism. This will help us to fix things if we have things to be fixed.
Oh, well, that was an invitation. Here, there's a second question here.
Wendy, this is a question for you.
Can you quickly introduce yourself?
Sorry, my name is Hari Haran. I'm from New York. I run a hedge fund in New York. Without being judgmental at all, stateside, it's quite common to hear a few refrains right now. One about Ukraine is that we don't have a dog in this fight. One about the Middle East is that as we get energy independent, the relative interest of America in the region takes a different hue. The question I want to ask you is, polls would indicate a fatigue in the American population about matters principally residing in the State Department. In fact, there is even some suggestion that this, other than State Department activism right now, a lot of Americans have a lot of issues at home to worry about. How do you respond to that? Is it possible that the expectations of America now are running way ahead of what the population in America is willing to support?
I don't think it's a mystery to anybody in this room that Americans are tired of foreign intervention. We just finished Iraq, and we're not finished yet. We're trying to finish Afghanistan, and that is difficult. Both NATO forces and American forces have spent 10 years, a decade, of blood and treasure in Afghanistan. So, sure, the American people would not like to bear the cost or the lives or the disruption to lives that another intervention would create. At the same time, Americans understand the world is not decoupled. As I said, the 2008 crisis showed us how connected we all are. America knows that two oceans cannot protect us from evil after 9/11. So yes, Americans are exhausted. They would like to focus on finishing the recovery from the recession and, like every other family in the world, creating jobs and making sure their kids have a good education, they have a good job and a decent retirement and good health care. It seems to be a topic of conversation these days in America. But Americans also pay more dues to the UN than any other country, provide more humanitarian assistance and charity than any other country, provide our forces and technical assistance to the world more than any other country, provide more foreign assistance than any other country in total sum. So I don't think you can say we aren't there. We are very there. What is so challenging and so difficult, and heaven only knows, I just felt it 2 days in Ukraine, is we are the last remaining superpower, and we have a military that is different than any other, and we've had long debates with Europe about Europe's defense capabilities. NATO is a very important source of that, and we are all looking for what tools, what capabilities we can bring to bear to help ensure that Ukraine stays sovereign, territorial integrity, what tools we can bring to bear when there are upheavals in the Middle East, to go to the topic that we are talking about now. What's appropriate, what's not appropriate. We are building the strongest security relationship with the Gulf states that has ever existed. because we understand how critical that is. And even though we will be probably the largest oil producer within 5 years, we won't be energy independent for 20. And it will take all of us to keep the global economy and the energy flows working throughout the world so that the global economy is strong. So you can't take one piece and disaggregate it. So yes, there are all of these streams happening consequentially, but there are enough Americans who have and certainly remember their parents' memories of World War II to want to ensure we're not back there in Europe again.
Allow me to pick up this question and to give it to you, Pierre, because when I'm listening to Wendy and I've been listening, of course, to all the panels, and we're all talking about the revival of the transatlantic relations, but obviously this is a lot about burden sharing. And isn't this the moment, especially when it comes to rebuilding or helping rebuild the MENA region, you know, not only from the upheavals that we've seen over the last couple of years, but also of the 40 years of stalemate, economic, political, social stalemate they've been in, that there has to be a lot more done in the department of resources, creative thinking, assistance to the Americans?
You know, we have Europe has a long history of a relationship with the Mediterranean, and we have a long history of cooperation with these countries. We have poured a lot of financial resources, a lot of expertise in those countries, and I think we have to be aware that that takes time. I'm a bit puzzled by the way we too easily put all these different countries together and talk about the Arab Spring. Or first of all, each one of these countries at the moment is facing a totally different situation. Tunisia, as you were saying, is coming out with a very interesting constitution. Egypt is also coming out with a constitution. It is different.
Completely different one, I'd say. Yeah.
It is different, but there are interesting elements in it also. Yemen, we were not talking about Yemen, but Yemen has found a way out of its turmoil with a different solution, and we could go on. And of course there is Libya, and of course there is Syria.
But there are some similarities with all the differences of all the countries. There are some similarities, and this is, you can wrap it up in 2 or 3 words: youth bulge, no jobs, dysfunctional economy.
No, there's more than that. There is economy, as you were saying in one of your questions. There's the whole issue of helping those countries to build state capacities, because many of them are facing problems in terms of governance. And thirdly, you have the issue of political democracy, how to build a deep democracy in those countries. But for each one of them, we need to take into account their differences and their specificities. And secondly, may I underline that, I think you need to take in account time. It takes time. You know, we ourselves in Europe pride ourselves of our democracy, but for some of our countries, the one I know best, it took nearly a century to come out with a decent democracy, a democratic system. So it takes time. You don't do this in a few days, and you don't build an economy so easily in 1 or 2 years. It takes time. The problem we're facing with many of these countries, I think the one single feature you find out in each one of these countries is the problem of youth, is the fact that you have youth and the middle, and I would say middle classes, les classes moyennes, as we say in French, because these are people who have got through some good training, who have now some good expertise, and who just don't find a job as they come out of school or they come out of university. This is where we need to help them. But here again, it takes time. It's building up a market. It's building up more than anything else, I think, in North Africa, building between Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and maybe others, a single market. And that takes time for many reasons, political hurdles or whatsoever. But I think this is the kind of thing we can all work on. And there, let's look at it. America has been doing a lot, but Europe has been doing a lot. You know, we had the Barcelona process. We had the Pays Tiers Méditerranéen about 20 or 30 years ago. We have now other ways of going ahead with them. So it's not that we're not trying to help and getting involved on that. It's building slowly. It takes time. a state, a governance system that works. It's helping them in building their market. It's helping them in building industries. And for this, we need not only the help of the public sector, we need also private sector. This is why we've gone through, the High Representative has gone through this whole task force where we bring together private sector and public sector, the financial circles, the industries, to try to work and help these countries to build their future.
There was a question here in the back, and I'm going here and here. Yeah, microphone is just left to you. Just turn around. Yeah.
My name is Odile Harvey. I'm an EU journalist from France. My question is addressed first to Sheikh Khalid bin Mohammed Al-Attiyah, and perhaps may also concern the other people on the panel. I noticed that there are a lot of initiatives in Qatar on the front of education and training, like WISE, with the Qatar Foundation, and Sheikh Mossab is very active on that. I also noticed last week, I heard that in Dubai, they organized a prize for the best teachers, and I think with quite a lot of money addressed to the best teachers in the world. And I just would like to know, all these initiatives, of course, they considering that this morning at this session on unemployment, education was voted first as the main concern. Now, in your region, do you address those initiatives and others, all these efforts for education and training? Do you address them to the people from your region, but also for other regions, like, for instance, Africa, where there are 34 out of 49 least developed countries are in Africa? Yeah. Or is it just prestige for universities from the West?
Is this a general question about education in Qatar and how much they invest into it?
No, I think I understand
the role of the, I noticed all those initiatives.
Will you take the question?
Thank you. Thank you for asking this. So this is a very important question. Yes, you are right. We have this initiative WISE, but we link this WISE initiative with another initiative called Politik, which targeted 100 million in the region, in North Africa and the Arab countries, and in Africa. And what we have did in Qatar now, not only for prestigious, as you say, we managed to bring all the top-notch, if you may call, universities from the United States and Europe, and we have them in Qatar as their main campus in Qatar. I'll just give some example, like Georgetown in Qatar, HAC from France. We have Carnegie Mellon, and this is not only for the student in Qatar. What we did is the Qatar Development Fund, which is a fund meant for a development to reach out and help where the most country needed in the world, have made allocation of 50% of its income for education abroad. This is what we have made, and we link them with WISE and Politik, so we have synergy on the way we reach out. So most of our national development fund, the sovereign development fund, is 50% of it goes to education for a country as such.
Thanks.
If I answered your question.
Yeah. There was a question here. Can we have the mic over here, second row? Thank you. Yes, you're next.
Mami from Morocco, OCP Policy Center. Well, 2 quick comments about the MENA region. Every time
very quick comment.
Very quick. We speak about the MENA region. There is something to remember. There is a huge misunderstanding. And, well, I met a lot of people from European countries, from America, and they know very little about the region. Almost nobody speaks Arabic. They don't go there. The visa procedures for Arabs to come are so complex that they don't even get to meet these people, and they speak a lot about them. I read so many papers about the Arab world. So first of all, when you speak about cooperation, you have to start by at least knowing the people you want to trade with, you want to cooperate with. And the second one is, from my understanding, nobody really understood what the region went through. A tremendous change, a huge change. And the Arab Spring was all about human dignity. whereas the question asked is about Islam and democracy. I think there is a problem with this focus, never-ending focus in Europe about Islam and women and whether they need to be...
It did contain 2 or 3 other issues as well.
Yes, but the results of the poll show that people still focus on Islam and democracy. I don't think the youth looking for jobs, they are asking whether they should pray or not, how they should do it. They just look for jobs. They are waiting for job offers, basically. So we defend human values on Europe, but whenever it comes to foreign policy, we do not implement them anymore. So these were just 2 very quick comments.
Thank you.
And just one very quick question. Well, you mentioned economic governance, structural reforms on very different sectors, but what about reinforcing the South-South cooperation? Because finally, Europe is closing itself. America has shifting priorities. It's now more focused on national issues. So what about the South-South cooperation? There's Latin America, there's Asia. What are we doing with these people?
Is this
also?
a question directed specifically to one of the panelists, or?
To Mr. Ghannouchi, maybe, because Tunisia is also concerned about the cooperation with Europe and other countries.
Thank you very much. So, about the South-South cooperation, would you like to give an answer? The South-South cooperation. Would Tunisia, probably not instead, but definitely in addition to Europe, rather also work with southern states like Latin America, seek economic cooperation with, for example, Latin America?
Tunisia is linked with Europe with partnership agreement. And during the Ennahda governments, this agreement has developed toward advanced partnership. So we would like that agreement will be
strengthened even.
Yes, we will be implemented and practice in reality. And when we are gathered here under the Marshall German Fund,
the German Marshall Fund, yeah.
I'm asking myself why we couldn't see such project
Marshall Plan for the region
for Tunisia, for this new democracy, which is successful story and can affect positively the relation between Islam and the West, between Islam and democracy, between Islam and women's rights, and affect the peaceful in Mediterranean, the peace in Mediterranean. People notice that there isn't the same measure when they compare, for example, between what Europe, what the West have done for develop the East countries toward the democracy and what they have done for the Arab Spring.
Unfortunately, perhaps the Arab Spring happened 2 years after the worst economic crisis hit both the United States and Europe, and that might have been a bit of an obstacle to a new Marshall Plan. There was one question here. I line you up, sir. Yeah, here. Microphone goes here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Gosh, there are so many. Number 2, 3, 4, 5.
I'll try to be brief then. My name is Khalid from TÜSİAD, Turkish Business and Industry Association. Well, seen from Istanbul, from the shores of the Bosphorus, connecting Black Sea with Mediterranean or the Balkans with the Caspian, democracy is important. And it is certainly about constitution, institutions, freedoms, rule of law, but it's also more than that, social development, income disparities, education, and in the 21st century about new technologies and the way the youth has started to evolve through this new society of information, this global society of information. Therefore, well, your concept, Mr. Ghannouchi, of investing in democracy, I think it deserves to be elaborated a little more. And as I observed also, other panelists approved you when you said this. So what is this investing in democracy?
That's a big, that's a very big question. Can you do it very shortly, really? What is this investing into democracy?
In democracy means supporting these new experiences, which are threatened by lack of development, economic development, which is threatened by some security problems, comes also from the lack of development. So if we are eager to support the democracy in the world, especially in the Mediterranean, so we have to invest in democracy to encourage investment in these democracies, in new democracies,
but I suppose it's very difficult to grasp what exactly investing in democracy means. Perhaps this has to be translated, just a few suggestions to you, into building institutions. I mean, Tunisia was one of the places where there were unions in place. You know, enhancing their work. What you mean is, do you mean by that also supporting, let's say, middle-sized companies, medium-sized companies, small and medium-sized, in order to make the economic development more stable, and then in order to enhance democracy by this, because people do see that there's a change. Would that be a correct translation?
To encourage investment in Tunisia, to encourage tourism, to implement the agreements, partnership between Tunisia and the EU countries.
Thank you. There's been one question over here, and then we have to go over here because I have a whole lineup of questions over here.
My name is Nawab Khan. I'm the correspondent of the Kuwait news agency Kuna in Brussels. And my question is to His Excellency, the Foreign Minister of Qatar. Sir, next week there is an important Arab summit in Kuwait. What are your expectations from this summit? Thank you.
We will start tomorrow, actually. The ministerial meeting is tomorrow, so I'm rushing from here to the airport so I can catch the ministerial meeting tomorrow. I think the agenda has three items. We have the peace process and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and this is maybe I can elaborate on a little bit. This is maybe the first time which we are all supporting, because this is the first time that the United States is a real mediator and not a messenger or facilitator. And this is what's giving us our hope, and we wish Kerry all the best, Wendy, on this. The second thing is we will be talking about how to help in reforming the structure of the Arab League. And then it will be a Syria issue. So it's already been set. The agenda for the meeting, for the summit is set. This is the main three issues will be discussed in the Arab League, if I answered your question.
Thank you. I have one more question here. Yeah, I know I see you all. I'm just afraid that we can't fit it all into the in the 10 minutes that we have left. Can we have the microphone over here? Right here, the gentleman here in this. Thanks. And we go over to you, and then hopefully we'll have one more question over here.
The mic's not on.
Shout. Oh, yeah. Shout or get him another mic, please. Here we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, as we were speaking and saying about low unemployment rates and all the problems that you're facing, I come from Latin America, and many of the issues that you're mentioning, apart from the religious side, were also faced by the countries in the region. And as we build up the democracies in the region, and I can say that it's more stable now, one of the things that we didn't see is that democracy is also a concept that can be abused. Like Venezuela, you can have elections, you can do stuff like that may sound like a democracy, but it really isn't. My question to you, particularly, sir, from Qatar.
To you is all the panel?
To the panel, Mr. Al-Attiyah,
yeah.
Is as the region develops the concept of democracy even more intensively, do you foresee that this democracy that you're building in the future could be abused? And what are the things that you're going to implement in order to make sure that it doesn't happen?
I'll give you
a tough one.
I'll do a quick answer. I'll pick on what Mr. Ghannouchi just said, that investing in democracy, one of the investment which all of us should do is try to protect this process and not to tamper with this new emerging democracy process. I think this is all obligation of all of us to do. Try to protect this process and not to be fed up or jump conclusion for a result. It's time.
Oh, well, Anton, you had a question here. Can we have the mic over here? And then if you're really asking a very short question, we'll have a last question over here.
I'll be as brief as I can. My name's Anton LaGuardia from The Economist. The European policy towards the Middle East, towards North Africa, has been denoted by the letter M, and more for more, supposedly, and then money, migration, and mobility, at a time when Europe has no money, it doesn't like migrants, and it doesn't want to let North African tomatoes into southern Europe. I detected from Pierre Vimont sort of a note that maybe policy needs to be changed. I'd like to know how should it change, and I'd like to know from Mr. Ghannouchi and Mr. Al-Attiyah what they think the real priorities should be, and maybe Wendy Sherman wants to answer as well, the real priorities for a European policy that makes sense.
That was a clever move. You ask one question, but there's 3 panelists. Okay. So here we are. Pierre, would you like to go first?
I mean, this is a discussion I think that should be left mostly for the new commission when they will come in. But that's clever.
That's a clever move as well.
even smarter. But everybody agrees that whether it be our eastern neighborhood or our southern neighborhood, we need to adapt our partnership to the new reality that is there. And we just can't go on as we were going on before. It's going to be about many of the tools that we have used already, but adapting them in a better way and in a more efficient way to what I'm quite struck. I said it at the beginning, but I mean, to some extent, it's the same thing we're facing at the moment with Ukraine, is that we're facing countries that have short-term urgent problem where they need I would say cash or whatever it is, but they need urgently an assistance. And that they need medium-term and long-term support also. And quite often, the instruments that Europe has are very good instruments for the medium term and the long term. It's about trade concessions, as I was saying, building a sort of a common market on which we can work, helping them in training their youth whatsoever. But many of these countries right now, as Mr. Ghannouchi was saying, is how can you help us right now for the next 6 months or 1 year to get tourists back into Tunisia? You know, I come from Tunisia myself. I know this country and how much they need, just like Egypt, tourists to come back. And that's something that is very urgent, that you'd have to look at it immediately. And I think we have to be able to diversify our resources and our way of helping these countries. And this is really the problem we're facing at the moment, and something that we have all to struggle with as we move along.
So Ghannouchi, would you also like to answer to this question?
Yes, I agree.
Wonderful.
Yes, that Tunisia needs quickly assistance. And because the priorities of Tunisia, first is the economy. There is a crisis, there is a real high level of unemployment. So we need that this young democracy has to be supported, because it can save the whole region, to promote, to shine the democracy in the region, and this is in favor of all sides.
Just quick follow-up question to you, Pierre and Wendy, just because I know that Monsieur Ghannouchi, of course, will say yes, but do you think that this new constitution will enhance trust of investors to invest in Tunisia? that they would get some peace, the peace and quiet and the rule of law that they need to invest, and that it might also enhance the much sought for tourism?
I certainly think it helps, of course.
Yes.
Sure enough.
Good, thank you.
So we can take one last question over here, the gentleman over here, the second row, and I'm afraid that I can't take all the, I mean, I know there are plenty of questions, but we're running out of time. So one quick last question.
I address myself to the Foreign Minister of Qatar. You seem to assume that the more you spend on education, the better quality you get. I'm afraid this is not an assumption that is borne out by facts. Saudi Arabia spends much more than so many other countries, and yet the educational quality over there is poor. In fact, good education requires a certain mindset. If that mindset is not present in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, in UAE, it will not matter how much you spend. We've seen this happen in other countries. In my country, Pakistan, where I've been teaching for 40 years, we substantially increased the university budgets over there. In fact, by a factor of 10, it did not result in the output that one could have hoped for.
So let's just ask you, do you see that the necessary mindset is there to really enhance education and to make, you know, the young educated people of Qatar able to compete with a global competition?
I can speak only about Qatar. For sure, we give our youth the proper tools, and it is for them to use it properly for the benefit of Qatar. And we have so many examples showed that our own people, with what they have, what tools we give them, they manage to do so many great things. One of which is getting the 2022 World Cup to Qatar. This is by Qatari hands.
Well, as a soccer fan, I have to say there's been much criticism out there about getting the World 2020 World Soccer Ship to Qatar, but we'll see about this. On this happy note of optimism, let's thank our panel, please.
We can speak about it if you want.